Oh, no, we don't use them. And I said, what do you use? And she gave me the Italian. Of course, she doesn't speak Italian. She didn't know it was Anna's.
Well, I guess we should get going because the 2 o'clock's going to come and push me out the door.
Oh, yes.
Huh? Anyway, I'm Sharon McCray, and I'm a master gardener, and I'm a member of the IAHF. And I have some handouts if you want to take them and pass them back. This one's got my recipes for how to make the limoncello and the other things we're going to talk about. And this is, we'll pass this one out later. So, oh, excellent. I just put together these slides night before last, so I hope you enjoy this little presentation about roasting tomatoes, which I think is the best way to preserve tomatoes. They don't take up a lot of room, and all the water comes out, and they are just
Sharon?
sun-dried. Yeah, sun-dried.
Save the paper.
When we leave, you're welcome to have a taste of these on your way out, okay? These are what they look like after they've been frozen for a year and thawed out last night. So I'm going to show you some pictures of my process. There we go. These are from the garden, basil and tomatoes and a little pepper in the corner. So it's really important when you're preserving food that you use really good quality. If you won't eat it, don't waste your time fixing it, okay? And there are some weird tomatoes out there. Those are more novelty kind of things that just Mother Nature's little laughter.
We're in business.
Use good quality. Don't use the stuff that you wouldn't put on your table to your family, because it's a lot of work and you're not guaranteed any kind of success. Some things you don't want to preserve, you just want to preserve. So all of these can be canned or frozen. We have eggplant, we have tomatoes. This was the Heirloom Festival up in Sebastopol.
Did you go this year?
No, it wasn't. They haven't had it for 2 years now.
I thought so. I didn't think it was.
Yeah, so,
Your mask fell on the floor.
oh, it sure did. Thanks, Tony. So these are heirloom tomatoes. I prefer to grow heirloom tomatoes. Do you want me to wear my mask?
No.
I prefer heirloom tomatoes for one simple reason, well, 2 reasons. The flavor is outstanding, and if seeds fall to the ground and they germinate, you're going to have a tomato that's going to remain true to what you originally planted. So when you grow some of the hybrids, they'll go back to the mother plant, which might not be something you like. Peppers. We have sweet peppers, we have hot peppers. You have to choose the pepper based on what flavors you want in your sauce. Hello.
Hi.
Would you like some limoncello?
Not right now, thank you.
Don't be so hasty. Answering for me.
This is how we get everybody to love the
There's some
class.
flyers over here too.
Oh.
Is there a wish?
Hey, how you doing?
So, fresh, ripe, firm tomatoes.
No one's in it. Yeah, thank you.
Peppers, the same thing. Isn't that gorgeous?
It is.
We miss the Heirloom Festival.
Oh,
though.
my goodness.
If you ever get a chance to go, it's in Santa Rosa, usually
Fairgrounds.
at the fairgrounds, and it is an amazing event. Some things, just eat them. Don't even worry, although a lot of people like to take the little tomatoes and put them in some vinegar for later on. But I think, for me, I want big, ripe, heavy tomatoes. Now the tomatoes have a lot of water in them. So what I do is I slice them, I quarter them, I put peppers, usually sweet peppers, I don't use hot peppers, a little olive oil, some fresh garlic, put it in the oven. You have the recipe for about 375 for about an hour. And then I pull the rimmed pan out, I drain off the liquid, put it back in the oven.
I catch the liquid and use it in my breakfast.
He could try to catch it.
Tomatoes,
Tomato base, and I saute, poach eggs on it.
So
Don't
this,
let it go to waste, it's full of flavor.
this is about halfway through the process. I cover the peppers. For some reason, they burn. They scorch really fast. Another one with green tomatoes, and there's some little cherry tomatoes in there. Some hot peppers, salt and pepper. This is what it'll look like when it's done. And then I scoop it all up, put it in gallon bags, and when I'm ready to make pasta, there it is. It's perfect. And the flavors, everything is from the garden. These are just some things from the garden. Apricots. Have you all had George's dried apricots? So we slice the apricots. They dry them on trays. Then he puts them in the trays, he stacks them, lights the sulfur. Oops, gotta go back. And that's where we get the dried apricots. This is something that you could do at home with just a dehydrator. I don't like the sulfur because that's a torch lighting the container of sulfur on fire. There was a time in this valley that the whole place smelled like the fruit and the sulfur,
So
wasn't
go
it?
back a slide. And that's him putting that pot under a stack of trays, and he's got it tinted with black plastic to capture all the fumes, and that's what actually cures, I guess is the right word.
Yeah, it dehydrates them.
It preserves them, really.
Yeah.
But it also keeps the color.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what the
Yeah, because
sulfur.
if you do it in the sun, they burn. They don't look good.
So preserving herbs. I picked these this morning. And so the sages, what we're doing now is what I do at home, is I'll clump them together like this and just hang them to dry. I don't need any dehydrator or anything like that. I found that some herbs, like the basil, I'll run it through the food processor, I'll pass this around, with a little bit of olive oil and put it in ice cube trays. And then when I make things and I need pesto or basil, it's fresh and it's there. Same with oregano. Some things dry better, some things freeze better. Parsley freezes really, really well, as does cilantro. You can put it in, freeze it, cut it up, put it in the freezer, and then when you want to cook with it, it's right there.
Did you partially cook, Sharon?
Nope, just,
Wash it, chop it, and put it in.
that's it.
Did you take the seeds off of those?
No, actually,
You want to keep those flowers in there?
the flowers on the basil are just as tasty as the leaves.
Okay.
So when they're in full flower, we'll put them in the salad to bring up some more color. So they're very, very tasty. We're finding that a lot of people don't realize, we were just talking about the fava beans. The fava flowers are very tasty, and the very tips of the fava plant is excellent in salads. And it's a lot of nutrition, and it's good for you. This right here is lavender. And the reason I brought it in is because we're all used to deep green and purple flowers. This is a beautiful, beautiful lavender, and I don't know where I found it. My garden is full of things that I don't know where I found them.
Where do you live?
I live in Campbell. I've lived in...
She actually has a little marker that says, "I don't remember planting this."
There's a reason. We have a 12-step program for gardeners. It seems to work very well. Anyway, when you leave, you're welcome to take any of these herbs that you'd like.
So what is the last one you did? What is
This is oregano.
No, I know that.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
Lavender.
Oh.
And
In
so
the past time, I've never seen that,
I've never
that
seen
color.
that either.
Yeah. that's
Is
lavender.
this the flowers or the leaves?
That's just the leaves. We do a lot of variegated plants in our garden because I like the color contrast.
Yeah, I
So
have lavender like
Maybe you can
that.
make a cutting.
yeah,
Are you in with the master gardener?
I am a master gardener. I became a master
so
gardener.
You must know Margie Jeffrey.
Oh yes, I know Margie very well.
Yeah, she's got a green thumb.
I became a master gardener in 1992, and I started the master composting program in Santa Clara County in 95. And I'm a master naturalist, and I'm currently writing articles for the Morgan Hill Life and Gilroy Life and Campbell Press. And the thing I have the most fun with is I do a once a month gardening show on KKUP Public Radio 91.5 FM, the fourth Thursday of the month. It's called the Old Time Farm and Garden Show.
So what happened to the tomato plants this year? They were terrible.
The biggest problem was we had so much heat and our nights were cool. All our nights were
Yes.
cool.
Yes.
I mean, we had, where we live in Campbell, we had temperatures in the 40s.
You know, we had
That night,
lemons
yeah.
and strawberries in Watsonville.
We had great tomatoes. We
So
had 2 crops this year.
Wow.
what happens with tomatoes is that when the temperature gets more than 95 degrees, the blossoms fall.
Oh.
They will not set fruit.
Yeah.
You can spray all that stuff or whatever, but when we have these hot days, the blossoms are going to drop. And the same thing happens if it gets below 55 degrees.
Yeah, the only thing that grew good for me was the savings, you know, and the rest.
Yeah,
And I got some from, you know, Margie and stuff too, and just get nothing.
yeah. You know, it's climate change. And when I became a master gardener 30 years ago, we planted our tomatoes on the 1st of April. That was when we planted the 1st of May. The 1st of May was when we planted our tomatoes. Not so anymore. We're planting tomatoes in March. And we have a lot of, I like to do experimental things. So I'll do an early girl and put it in the ground in August. And then in 3 months, I'll have new tomatoes because the cycle is a 90-day tomato. So, you know, I encourage you to push the envelope a little bit.
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna try to do it next year, you know, obviously.
Yeah.
But I was experimenting too with taking them and adjusting them to cold weather. Take the plant and put it in like we do with strawberries and blueberries.
Right.
We can do it to adjust them to that,
Mm-hmm.
just to see. But I got, you know, it worked, but not quite like I expected.
Well, and you know, when you fertilize your tomatoes, there's a couple of things. Tomatoes, as tall as the plant is as deep as the roots. People don't realize that. And if we give them a fertilizer that has a lot of nitrogen in it, like the numbers on the fertilizer bag, you know, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, when even the Miracle-Gro, the biggest number is nitrogen. And people say, oh, I've got 8-foot tomatoes and no fruit.
No fruit, yeah.
Because that middle number is where the fruit and flowers come from.
Yeah,
And
so
that-
it's looking for that. It's
Right, and so, you know, tomatoes like an acid soil. Our soil is alkaline.
Right.
So we try to add fertilizers that are restricted because of the pH of the soil. So it's a delicate balance. The ones that always do the best are the ones that come up in the crack in the sidewalk
Yeah.
or in the bottom of the compost bin. And you go, oh, I'm going to pull it out. No, I'm not going to pull it out.
Well,
So,
yeah, nothing's the same anymore like the old days. Where we asphalted everything so cleanly.
we've got so much heat coming up from the floor. And now my next door neighbor, he grows his tomatoes under a big apple tree. So they never get the heat that my full sun tomatoes do. So anyway, we have 6 different kinds of basil. And if you have the pesto, it was made up from all 6 varieties, because we picked them on Wednesday for Marie.
You know, some of the plants that you used to pull out, they're growing all year now.
Yeah.
Like some of the little peppers. They grew back from last year. They never died.
You know, the thing I learned too is that, like beans, string beans, Kentucky Wonders, those, the bush beans especially, if after you harvest and you prune them back, you'll get a whole other flush of fruit, just like the first flush of fruit. I never realized that they would do that. It's important to harvest,
Do
you know.
you grow beans too?
Mm-hmm.
Do you grow the Romano?
Yes.
That's a hard one to find.
Yeah. Well, Francie?
Yeah, they come from the San Francisco market.
Francie seeds.
Yeah,
But this year, because of,
it was terrible.
BC, shall we say, that's not before computers, but BC, Francie could ship all their seeds here, and now it's impossible to get imported seeds, especially from Italy. So, as gardeners, we stick things in our pockets wherever we go. We just came back from Canada. There were a few things stuck in my pockets. Rosemary, the flowers are good. It's a good sturdy plant. It should be in everybody's garden. With the rosemary, you have to chop it, or it's to me it's too yucky to eat.
Woody?
Rosemary.
Woody?
Yeah, it's very woody. That's a good word. Here's some more lavender. And the lavenders are good in potpourris and in making vinegars and oils. And let's see what I have here.
Lavenders take a lot of more water than I first thought.
Well,
They do take, they take heat, but you gotta make sure that there's enough water.
right, at the roots.
Yeah.
And the tough thing about lavenders is they need to be pruned. And we let them go till they get so leggy, and then we cut them back. Same with the rosemary. You cut it back and it looks ugly. So these are some oils with dill and all kinds of nasturtium, senior moment, all kinds of things put in the oils. I've got some instructions on my sheet there how to infuse the oils. I find that there's little books you can pick up that just have tons of little really neat recipes that aren't necessarily commonplace, especially like putting together vinegars. I found that when I go on the internet and I put in vinegars, the recipes have a tendency to be 30 ingredients and take 2 days. Oh, yeah, I use, this is the one I prefer. But if you want to know how old I am, this is my,
Is that UC?
the Department of Ag, and it's
Is that UC? Department of Ag?
no, it's not the university. It's the USDA. Publication number 10, published in 1965, in black and white. I use books I pick up. You can go to the used bookstore and get them for 50 cents. So those are the kind of things that I like to get my hands on. Because we try our mother's recipes, and things have changed. The consistency of the oil, the fineness of the sugar, all those things change. And so it's important when you're canning or preserving food that you follow the recipe, and if it says it needs to be processed for a half an hour, process it for a half an hour. The university has a publication about botulism. It used to kill a lot of people, and it probably still does, we just don't know about it. But I have these brochures if you're interested. I'll put them here, and on the way out, you can grab one. So peaches, what do we make out of peaches? Jams, jellies, cobblers, pies. When I make my pies, I always like to put a little tapioca pudding in the bottom of the pie shell to absorb all that moisture so it doesn't become soggy.
Pudding or just tapioca dry?
Dried. I just sprinkle a tablespoon in the bottom. Beans, we talked about beans.
Just beans.
So if you don't, when you're preserving beans, if you don't blanch them, when you take them out of the freezer, they turn black. So it's really important that you remember to blanch them. I make a lot of pickles. These are my fancy labeled bread and butter. Robert won't let me share these with anybody, so you can only look at them. But if he leaves, I'll let you taste them. So I take the cucumbers with onions, I put them in a stainless steel bowl, I cover them with about a half a cup of salt and maybe like 3 pounds of ice, and I let them sit for about 4 hours. Then I rinse everything off, and I put it in a brine, and I cook them until the pickles come clear, and then I can them. And these are the herbs that I use: mustard seed, turmeric, cloves, and celery seed.
And after you've eaten all of the slices of pickles, don't throw the juice away. Drink it. It is delicious.
And this
Good
is
salad dressing.
And we'll make good salad dressing as well. Mine never makes it to a salad. I just drink it.
and I make an Italian liqueur called nocino with green walnuts. Walnuts that aren't ripe. And you slice them in a container. You add vodka and some herbs and orange slice. And this is it's from a fir tree, I believe. I'll think of what it is. And it makes an incredible liqueur. Some things I don't even touch. These are oak root fungus. They're very edible, but I pick mushrooms in the wild and I give them to my fungus people because I don't want to die. And one little last bit of trivia before we get into the gardening is when you're buying sweet onions, the flatter they are, the sweeter they are.
Oh,
Most people don't, you want a big fat onion. The sweet ones are flat. So when the Vidalia and the other, the what?
The Camellias.
The Maui onions, right? When they come in, get them flat. If you're picking through a...
The onion that's hard to get now is the tortilla.
Yes.
That onion.
And this is the time to... Now we're going to talk about gardening. And, I didn't talk about... You want to talk about your olives?
Well, I was just sharing, we were doing the harvesting. I don't have to talk about them, but the cured olives, I have a house up in Sonoma, so I can still pick olives. In Santa Clara County, you can't pick them because they're all infested with the larvae. So I've been able to pick them, and I thought I'd bring some to share.
Oh, good. I have, when we're done, if we get ran out of here, we can go into a table out there. I have little cups, and we can taste the tomatoes, and I'll open this, if you can distract Robert, I'll open the pickles, and we'll have some olives. Yes?
okay. Does your house in Campbell have a cellar? Where do you store all this?
Well, you're not going to believe this. We have a 2-car garage, and we actually have a car in it.
Oh,
I drive Robert crazy, trust me.
but he gets to eat it.
Yeah, he does. He always forgets that part, or not always, usually. But I don't have a root cellar. I do a lot of my herb drying and storage of things like this, and my limoncello and the nocino. I have an office, and it's the smallest bedroom in my house, and that's where it's dark. There's a little window. It was the dungeon. That's where we put the boys, and less room for them to make a mess. And so that's where we keep everything. We did buy a full-size freezer because I just got back from fishing. We just got back from fishing in Canada. And so we need room for the 60-pound halibut I caught by myself.
Because of that little baby fish, wasn't it?
Yeah, 60 pounds.
But I mean, I thought a little baby fish was on your hook and then the big ones.
Oh, that's his.
That was a different fish.
Yeah. Robert got 2 fish with 1 hook.
Yeah.
The little baby fish swim in, and the big lingcod came and grabbed it.
Oh my God.
So I keep a lot. I freeze a lot, and I have one of those big metal racks in the garage that I keep all my. And when I can, I put them back. The jars back in the box that the jars came from. I reuse my jars. I reuse my rings. I do not reuse the lids. I toss them. Because the way the lids are made,
You don't seal well.
they have a rubber seal. And when that gets against the hot jar, when I can, I'll wash my jars in the dishwasher. Then I will turn them upside down in the oven at 170. And then I leave them in the oven, and then I bring out 2 or 3 and I fill them. And then the heat from the jar and the lid seals. So once that is, they're made for single use. And you know, our moms used to use, my mom, when she made jam, she always used wax, paraffin. And I remember we always had to scrape all the life off of the paraffin before we could eat the jam. So I only use them once. And I prefer a wide mouth to a narrow mouth, although we'll use whatever we have. Robert is the #1 recycler of glass, and he uses any jar, any lid. And
But that's got vinegar though.
it's in a vinegar brine, so it's very safe. So anyway, just be really careful when you're canning. And I write on the lid for 2 reasons. So that I remember what it is, and so that I don't reuse the lid. I throw it away. I can't emphasize how important it is to keep things clean when you're canning. Freezing, it's a little loosey-goosey. I have a tendency to save during the season when all the berries are in, and my #1 dessert when we have company is vanilla ice cream and fresh berries, and there's always a little bit left. And I pour them in a container in the freezer, and then in the fall I'll make berry jam with all the leftovers. So that's what we're going to talk about as far as food preservation. And now we're going to talk about gardening in the winter. You have, does everybody live in Santa Clara County? Is that pretty safe to assume? We have a little trap house. Our lot's 6,800 square feet, the house is about 14. So we have very limited space, and we manage to grow a lot of our own food there. We have fruit trees espaliered against the fence. We are blessed that we can, at one time, this valley fed the world with the amount of food we have. I moved to this valley in 1959. I was very young. And I remember walking to school, and the ground would be covered with blossoms. It was like our snow. And so I urge you to, a lemon tree, a little mire doesn't take, the dwarfs don't take up any room. We can grow just about anything we want here. Our Mediterranean climate mimics Italy and the Mediterranean. And interestingly enough, when we talk about a Mediterranean climate, and you go to the nursery and you find a plant from Chile or from South Africa, you say that's not a Mediterranean plant. What we're talking about is the area, the same distance from the equator with a western shore. So that's why the western shore of Chile and Argentina and South Africa are considered Mediterranean climates. So we can grow, you have a list, I haven't handed it out yet, of all the things we can plant right now. And I like to tell people, just because the nursery's selling it doesn't mean it's something you want to grow. It's very important that you grow things that you know you will eat or your family will eat. Too often we'll go to the store and say, oh, let's get rutabagas, but nobody's going to eat them in my house. And so know what your family's going to enjoy. Take an inventory. The dates to remember, the second week of November, we typically have our first frost. And our last frost has typically been the second week of March. But we didn't, some years we don't even have frosts. And that's where our cherry trees struggle.
Yeah, never.
Because they need, bless you, they need a certain amount of chill hours. Chill hours are hours that the temperature is below 32 degrees. So some nights it's only 2 hours. So they add them all up. About the minimum on cherries is 400 hours.
Yeah, apples and pears too, same thing.
Yeah, and so there's so much asphalt and there's so much pavement, we just don't get the chill like we used to.
Why you don't get the rain either.
Yeah, but they are developing new varieties. Who'd have thought that we could grow blueberries in Santa Clara County because of our alkalinity in our soil, but we can't. The growers have created varieties that will hybridize, that will grow in our soil successfully. So I like to say to keep watering until you hear or smell the rain. Because now we're supposed to have rain next week, right? Anybody want to put any money on that?
Sure. It'll bypass it.
Yeah,
Before it evaporates, before it hits the ground.
that's right. Verga, they call that. So keep watering. Now is the most important time to irrigate your fruit trees, because your fruit trees are making up their mind what food they're going to produce next year based on the rain they're getting now. And if they're not getting rain, they're saying, I can't feed the fruit I'm going to produce. So fruit trees need deep watering. Once a month, put a soaker hose down or a sprinkler and you let it run for 4 hours. You only have to do it once or twice, but they need to know that there's sufficient water for them. Yeah. Do it at night.
Your trees.
Or the weekends, because you know they're not working on the weekends, right?
Yeah, they're out there.
I'm sorry?
Does citrus have the same requirement?
Citrus like watering 12 months out of the year. And my citrus right now has got fruit and flowers. That's typical. And so I keep my water consistent on my citrus year-round.
But how long are you watering?
I'm watering on a drip system twice a week. Yes, Sam Licardo. Twice a week for an hour. But it's on a drip, so it's a really slow drip.
Yeah.
And if you know, it's really important if you have drip irrigation that you monitor it, because we were out there pulling weeds the other day, and you know, you have a circle about this big of wet and the rest of it's bone dry. You can't get a spade through it. I just praying for rain.
The animals eat the drip too.
Yeah.
Right. I am not a big fan of drip because by the time you know you have a problem with drip, plants are dead.
How far is your drip from the base of the tree?
It should never be close to the tree. 24 inches. The canopy of the tree, the roots of the tree go out to the edge of the canopy.
So how far is your drip?
My drip on my citrus is about 12 inches from the trunk of the tree. Because it's in a retaining wall.
Okay.
So it's
All right.
very, very confined.
Okay.
And I really, really, really rely on my neighbors to water because
Sure.
there's a retaining wall, and
Yeah.
so the water comes down that way. It's a critical time to be cleaning up in your garden. Peach leaf curl. How many people get peach leaf curl? It overwinters in the soil. So if we don't clean up all the debris on the soil, when the rains come in the spring, they're going to splash those spores up into the tree and you're going to get peach leaf curl. So what I generally do is I will put down a blanket of newspapers I think the sports section works best. And then some mulch over the top of it. The newspapers will break down naturally, but it'll stop that process. And I've just worked really hard to get rid of that peach leaf curl.
So you don't spray at all?
No.
No.
Do you dig the newspaper in the soil, or you?
No, I laid down about 4 sheets.
And you dig it up eventually? Or you
It'll
just let it-
decompose, yeah.
Okay, so you just dig it in.
And the earthworms love it, you know,
Yeah.
it works.
Okay.
I just find that seems to be the best way for me to do it. We don't want to fertilize, there's a lot of things we don't want to fertilize after a certain date. We don't want to fertilize citrus after the July 1st because it sends out all this new growth, and then the aphids just devour the plant, and the leaf miners will come. If you're having problems with your leaves all curling up and look like there's a little racetrack in them, those are leaf miners. And so the only way to, well, you can try neem oil. The best way is to, first and foremost, keep your plants healthy. They're better. We are stronger to resist disease if we're healthy. And, you know, to feed them regularly, like reading the instructions when you buy a plant and it says fertilize twice a year. Or, you know, citrus are very heavy feeders. They need to be fed almost every 2 months. And when you're fertilizing, I always tell people the same thing. Do half as much twice as often. And if you take vitamin C and you take 1,200 milligrams, your whole body is going to go into shock. But if you take 600 now and 600 in a week, it evens itself out, and it's much healthier for the plants. So fertilize, not very much needs to be fertilized right now. But if you fertilize with potassium and potash right now, potash will give you an extra 5 degrees protection from freeze. So if you have a bougainvillea, as an example, that's very sensitive to freezing, if you fertilize it with potassium, it will withstand a freeze of 30 degrees, 5 more degrees. So we don't have a lot of freezes anymore, so it kind of evens things out that way. Lawns, you know, everybody hates to learn about lawns, but if you think about your landscape, probably 60% or more of your area is lawn. So it's a good idea to aerate, to thatch.
That or astroturf.
Huh?
That or astroturf now with the new generation.
And if you want your lawn to look really green in the wintertime, if you have a lot of crabgrass that turns that ugly brown, if you get some ryegrass seed, it's a cool season grass. You can scatter the seeds on top of your existing lawn. It'll come up green. It'll look gorgeous until it gets hot. A lot of places, golf courses, whatever, that's the secret to keeping it green. Fruit trees, you know, we summer prune for size, we winter prune for fruit. If you get suckers on your fruit trees, if you cut them off, it stimulates them to grow more vigorous. Same thing with your roses. If you can break them off, they will be less likely to come back. Let's see here. Roses, you know, we believe we need to prune the roses really hard. When I look at a book, a gardening book, the first thing I look at is where it's published. Because if it's on the East Coast, they grow things, their soil is different, their climate is different, everything is different than what we have here. So I try to get something that's more localized for California. So don't feed the roses now, they need to go dormant. Cut them back. In England now, they're cutting them with hedge trimmers. You know, we're in there with our pruners, you know, doing all this. If you're going to have an event, like right now, if you want to have roses, in 8 weeks you cut off all your rose flowers now. And in 8 weeks you'll have blossoms again. So that's something important to remember. So it's time to start seeding your winter vegetables. And lettuces, we direct sow those in the ground, which means we just spread them out. Carrots, I like to mix my carrot seeds with radish seeds. And I'll put them in a gallon of soil, stir them all up, I have the pack, and plant them succession. So I'll plant one, and then in 2 weeks I'll plant another row, in 2 weeks another row. The radishes come up in 4 days. They will naturally thin, or where they allow the carrots to grow. Carrots need to be kept moist until the tops are this far above the ground. So if you plant carrots and you say, well, they didn't do well, 99 times the problem is they're not kept wet. They need to be kept wet. Once they're up, they're fine. And I strongly suggest for our growing area that you buy, don't try to grow carrots that are this long. There's a lot of carrots that are 8 inches or shorter that are flavorful and will do very well in our environment. Spinach, now's the time. Onions, you can go to the store and you can buy onion sets, which are bulbs, or you can buy them in a bundle and plant them. I take a pencil, stick it in the soil, and then I put the little green onion in there, and that's how I do it. Spacing is important because you want a nice big onion. And there's so many varieties. The Maui sweets, the Vidalias, they're really hard to find unless you go to Lunardi's with, and spend.
A good buyer.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, what else? We can grow broccoli. Broccoli does very, very well here. There are reflowering broccolis that you can buy, I think, on the seed list. It lists the varieties that we recommend. Yeah, because if you cut off the flower stalk, which is what you're eating in the broccoli, it'll keep producing through the whole winter. You have to be careful because you'll be invaded by aphids. Aphids are just, I don't know, they come in orange, they come in black, they come in green, whatever. I like to grow broccoli. It's a good time to plant asparagus. Asparagus is another one that takes a lot of water. So if you have an area in your yard where it's constantly wet because of a dripping hose or your neighbor overwaters, that's a good place to plant asparagus. The first year, any asparagus that comes up, you should chop off, put the frillery little things in your salad, and the second year you'll start getting actually good sized asparagus. Cauliflower does really well in our valley. So does cabbage. So there's a lot of nutritious things. We were, in the olden days, the days of our parents, they ate with the seasons. So we learned that come the fall, we were going to eat broccoli, we were going to eat cauliflower, we were going to eat all these unusual things. We were going to eat apples. In the spring, we're going to eat peaches and nectarines and tomatoes. And so the nutritional values of these foods supplied us with what we needed during the season. Now we can get tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes, in January. And so our children are starting to say, I don't want to eat broccoli. I don't want an apricot. I want a banana. So learning to eat with the seasons is probably very beneficial for you because your body's getting all these micronutrients that only come in certain foods. So that's the end of my lecture as far as eating with the seasons. I think it's just really, really important. Perennials, it's time to cut back your perennials. They should be cut back. All your salvias have square stems. So if you're confused what a plant is and somebody says, what is that? Squeeze the stem. If it's square, you can say, oh, it's a salvia, and you think you're really, really smart. I do it all the time. So it's time to cut back the perennials this far off the ground.
Even if they're in bloom?
Even if they're in bloom. Now, we're beekeepers.
Yeah.
And I just can't cut anything off if it hasn't blossomed yet. So that's the excuse I use anyway.
How many acres is your backyard?
I beg your pardon?
How many acres is your backyard?
It's just a little lot, but it's the last house in
It's
the court.
intense.
So the back fence is 160 feet. The front is 25. But yes, we have 4 beehives at home. One in the front yard.
They're scary looking. They're full of those bees.
You know,
Can't live without them.
my neighbors
I know.
love it. Every year we take everybody a little jar of honey. Nobody complains. And,
Keeps the riffraff out.
right.
Yeah.
The UPS guy, the Amazon guy, they all, they have no problems with the bees. It's time to thin camellias if you want bigger flowers. And it's important this time of the year. You're probably noticing that your broader leaf plants, camellias, rhododendrons, that are getting really dusty. That becomes a real healthy place for the spider mites. So it's important to artificial rain, hose them off. Just hose them off. And I talked about keeping up the debris that's on the ground. It's where all the bugs live, the earwigs, the snails. So, and even cockroaches. We're having a lot of issues with garden cockroaches. They don't want to be in the house, they want to be in the garden. And I always like to tell people to think, to identify what your pest is before you destroy it. As a master gardener, we have a lot of people call and they say, there's something eating my tomatoes and I want to kill it. And you're going, what is it? What is it? A rule of thumb, if you have a plant and it's eaten around the edge, that's a chewing insect, such as an earwig. If this part is chewed and has holes in it, that's a sucking insect. It's probably a slug or a snail. So if you're going to treat for a snail, the treatment is different than for an earwig. What we do with earwigs, I'll take like a tuna fish can, I'll fill it 2/3 of the way with oil, cheap oil. Don't use the EVOO. Use, go to the dollar store and buy a thing and a little bit of soy sauce. I put it in the garden. The earwigs, I squish the can down. The earwigs are attracted to the scent. They go in, they drown. The dog has breakfast. It works well. So, and as far as capturing snails and slugs, don't waste the beer. Okay? We all have in our refrigerator little jars of yeast when we were in the bread making phase of our lives. That yeast is that smell is what's going to attract the snails. So you just put a pie tin and Marie calendars, because there's no place to take them anymore, and scoop that in, put some water, a little bit of yeast, the snails will come and that solves that problem. I also use diatomaceous earth for a lot of pest control in my garden, because it will discourage raccoons. We seem to be having a lot of raccoons tearing up everybody's lawn. There's no predators. I don't know how we're going to solve this problem. There was just a picture posted on Nextdoor with 8 raccoons on the fence. And they're vicious. They're very vicious. They killed one of my dogs, and I have little dogs, and so don't leave out food for them. But the diatomaceous earth will help control ants, anything that crawls. It's not a poison, it's not a toxin. It's like fiberglass, and the ants crawl on it, and it hurts them, so they quit eating. So that's
5 minutes.
Oh, I have 5 minutes. You guys have any questions? You want to? Yes.
How do you make your hydrangeas turn blue? I've tried ammonia, I've tried sulfur.
Rusty nails. You need iron. The more iron, the purpler they are.
Oh.
It's iron. We used to just put rusty nails, but I don't even know if you can find rusty nails anymore.
I know, you have to stand guard in a boaty.
So iron, there's an ironite that you can spray.
Yeah.
I gotta get this.
We have to remember that because of our pH, the pH restricts the release of iron in our soil. So if we're putting a fertilizer on the ground that has good iron in it, and the pH is not right, it's never going to get up into the plant. So we foliar feed. We put it in a liquid form and we spray it directly on the plant. And when you have yellow in your citrus, or yellow in your camellias, that's an indication of lacking of iron. So that's the best way to get it in there, is byproducts to put in the soil. But if you want immediate, you want to make sure it gets to the plant, spray the plant itself. Okay? Anything else?
My figs were incredibly tiny this year.
Your what?
My figs.
Figs, you
They're
know,
just tiny.
they didn't get enough water. They just did not get enough water. If we even got figs.
And I need to start watering them. I need to water them big now, so they know the next season they'll be.
They're going to believe, they're going to trust you that there's going to be water this year.
You know, Bill Constantino has nice figs.
Uh-huh.
Nice big black ones and white ones.
Wonder where they come from.
His garden.
Really?
Yeah, have you ever been out to it?
No, I haven't.
He's out off of Hoosier.
Oh.
He's got
Oh,
beautiful peaches and just, he's got beautiful fruit.
you know, Andy Mariani
Yeah.
down
And I go there.
in San Martin, he has tastings where you can go and taste 40 different kinds of apricots. Or 30 different kinds of peaches.
Yeah,
Well, we don't know how blessed we are that we have all this. And it's, oh good, I have to clean up.
Yes, thank you, Sharon. You can see her at Emma Prush Park.